It began as nothing, a speck of raised skin, no larger than a pencil eraser, sitting quietly at the base of Jamie's neck. His mother thought it was a birthmark. His father barely noticed it at all. Even the family doctor, during those rushed childhood checkups, glanced at it once and dismissed it as harmless. But sometimes, the things we're told to ignore grow into the very shadows we can't escape. Jamie didn't know it yet, but that tiny lump was a silent passenger in his life, quietly rewriting the course of his future. As a child, he never questioned it. Why would he? Kids are built to trust the adults around them. But trust had become a blindfold, and by the time Jamie reached middle school, the mark had changed. It was no longer a flat mole like it. It had begun to lift, to form a small mound that pressed against the inside of his shirts. That was when Jamie's habit began. Collars buttoned high, hoodies even in summer, scarves when no one else was wearing them. The world thought it was a fashion quirk. Jamie knew better. And maybe you do too. Maybe you've had something on your body, in your mind, or in your past that you've learned to hide so well people stop asking questions. But what happens when the thing you hide refuses to stay hidden? Jamie's story isn't just about a lump. It's about what happens when years of silence are finally broken, when the truth beneath the surface demands to be seen. What the doctors eventually found beneath his skin would leave everyone, even Jamie himself, utterly horrified. This isn't a story for the faint of heart, but it is one for the brave. Stay with me, and if you've ever carried a secret, hit subscribe. You're about to see why some truths can't be buried forever. Jamie entered the world on a rainy Tuesday in a small-town hospital where the windows rattled with the wind and the corridors smelled faintly of bleach and warm coffee. His cry was thin but determined, the kind of sound that made his exhausted mother smile despite the hours of labor. When the nurse placed him on her chest, she noticed a tiny raised patch of skin on the back of his neck, no bigger than the head of a matchstick. It was the color of faded freckle, smooth to the touch, and easy to dismiss. The doctor glanced at it under the harsh fluorescent light, made a small note on the chart, and said the words that would echo through the next decade. It's nothing to worry about. In those first years, Jamie's world was painted in soft tones, blankets that smelled faintly of lavender detergent, the hum of his grandmother's knitting needles in the next room, the way his father's hands were always warm from working outside. The lump on his neck simply blended into the background, no more noticeable than the dimples in his cheeks when he laughed. His parents were loving, though their lives were a constant balance between paychecks and bills. His father worked long shifts at the mill, coming home with dust clinging to his hair, while his mother juggled part-time work at the diner and caring for Jamie. His grandmother, Evelyn, often watched him during those stretches, her voice low and steady as she told stories of old remedies her own mother swore by. But even she only ever gave the lump a passing glance, muttering once about nature's little marks before returning to her knitting. Each year, there were the routine checkups. The sharp scent of antiseptic filled the pediatrician's office, and the paper on the exam table crinkled beneath Jamie's small frame. A cold stethoscope pressed against his chest, a quick look at his ears, a tap on his knees. When the doctor's hands brushed over the back of his neck, there was always that same indifferent conclusion. It's nothing to worry about. Jamie believed them, because children believe the people in white coats. As the seasons turned in his childhood filled with scraped knees, summer sprinklers, and hot cocoa in the winter, the lump stayed quiet. It didn't hurt, not yet. It didn't draw attention, except in the rare moment when the light caught it just right, casting a small shadow where his hairline met his skin. No one thought to question it. No one imagined that something so still could one day roar to life. But beneath that calm surface, a story was already unfolding, one that would twist the safe, predictable rhythm of Jamie's life into something none of them could have foreseen. The lump was waiting, silent and patient, for the day it would no longer be ignored. By the time Jamie turned 13, the lump was no longer a quiet shadow in his life. It was a growing presence he could neither ignore nor explain away. At first, it had simply risen slightly under his skin, like a small pebble hidden beneath a blanket. But by his sophomore year, it had become a visible bulge just below his hairline, a swelling that seemed to pulse under the fluorescent glare of the school hallway lights. He began to notice the stares before he heard the whispers. In the lunch line in the locker room at the back of the classroom, eyes would dart to the back of his neck, linger for a moment too long, then flick away as if they hadn't looked at all. The first time someone asked outright, it was during biology class. A boy 2 seats over leaned forward, squinting, and said in a tone that carried across the room, "Hey, what's that on your neck?" The word seemed to freeze the air around him. Jamie's face flushed, and he mumbled something about just a mole, pulling his hoodie tight around his shoulders. But the question left a mark that went deeper than any stairs. From then on, the hoodie became his armor. When the weather was too warm for it, he traded it for high-collared shirts or wrapped a scarf loosely around his neck, claiming it was just his style. He let his hair grow longer in the back, practicing in the mirror how to let it fall just right so it would cover the bulge. But no matter how careful he was, there were moments when his guard slipped, a gust of wind, a forgotten scarf, and the glances would come again. Inside, Jamie carried a churn of emotions he couldn't untangle. Fear, because the lump was growing. Embarrassment, because it made him different. Anger, because no one, not his parents, not the doctors, seemed to take it seriously. He began skipping out on sports, worried about the way his neck might be exposed during a game. He avoided swimming altogether. The thought of standing bare-necked in the bright, echoing pool area was unbearable. The distance between him and his peers widened with every passing month. He started eating lunch alone, headphones in, pretending to scroll through his phone. Even his best friend, Tyler, noticed the change. "You've been weird lately," Tyler said once, shoving his tray aside. "You never hang out anymore." Jamie just shrugged, muttering, "Got stuff going on," though the truth sat heavy on the back of his neck. The breaking point came at the spring school dance. He'd worked up the courage to ask Emily Carter, the girl from his English class who always smiled when she passed him in the hall. He wore a crisp shirt and combed his hair neatly, but as he stood in front of her in the gym's twinkling lights, she glanced at his neck, just for a second, before forcing a polite smile and saying, "I'm kind of already going with someone." It wasn't the rejection itself that crushed him, but the way her eyes had flickered to it before she answered. That night, Jamie stood in front of his bathroom mirror long after everyone had gone to bed. He turned his head one way, then the other, tracing the outline of the lump with trembling fingers. It was larger now, firm under his skin, and it seemed to carry a heat of its own. He thought of the doctor's old reassurance. "It's nothing to worry about," and felt a sudden, sharp doubt cut through him. For the first time, Jamie wondered if the thing on his neck wasn't just a mark he had to hide, but a shadow that might one day consume more than just his reflection. By his early 20s, Jamie had finally reached a point where ignoring the lump was no longer possible. It had grown into a firm, unmistakable bulge that pressed against the collar of every shirt he owned. Strangers sometimes stared openly now, on buses, in checkout lines, even passing him on the street. One afternoon, while standing in a crowded elevator, a woman's eyes flicked to the side of his neck before she quickly stepped back, as if distance might protect her from whatever it was. That moment lingered in his mind for days. Determined to finally do something, Jamie booked his first appointment at a small walk-in clinic. The doctor barely looked up from the chart before giving the lump a quick glance and saying, "Looks like a benign cyst. Nothing serious. No scans. No blood work. Just a shrug and a prescription for anti-inflammatory pills." Jamie left with a hollow sense of déjà vu. The same dismissive tone he'd heard as a child, now echoing into adulthood. Over the next 2 years, the pattern repeated. Different doctors, different clinics. Always the same quick look, the same diagnosis. Probably fatty tissue. One particularly rushed physician didn't even touch it before writing down lipoma on the chart. Jamie began to feel less like a patient and more like an inconvenience. Someone to shuffle out the door so the next name could be called. It wasn't until his third attempt that someone suggested a simple fix. The doctor recommended aspiration, draining the lump with a needle. Jamie agreed instantly, clinging to the fragile hope that maybe this time something would change. The procedure was far from simple. The cold sting of antiseptic filled the air as he lay on the paper-covered table. He felt the sharp puncture, followed by an intense, burning pressure as the doctor pushed the needle deep into the mass. Warm fluid slid into the syringe, and for the first time in years, Jamie felt the lump shrink beneath his skin. But the relief was short-lived. Within weeks, it was back, larger, firmer, and somehow heavier than before. That failure marked the beginning of a slow spiral. Jamie's posture began to change. He tilted his head slightly forward to keep his collar high, shoulders hunched as if trying to fold into himself. This new stance, meant to hide his flaw, made him look tense and unapproachable, something potential employers seemed to notice immediately. He lost count of how many interviews ended with polite but clipped emails. We decided to move forward with another candidate. Once, after leaving a particularly disastrous interview, Jamie was standing at a bus stop when a man beside him suddenly blurted, "Man, what's wrong with your neck?" The question landed like a slap, cutting through the city noise. Jamie muttered something about an old injury, staring hard at the pavement until the bus arrived. At home that night, he avoided the mirror. He could feel the lump without touching it, an ever-present weight that seemed to define his silhouette. In moments of quiet, he caught himself wondering if this was simply who he was now, the guy with the thing on his neck. The healthcare system had given him nothing but shrugs. The procedures had given him nothing but false hope. And the world, it seemed, had already decided what to see when they looked at him. By the time Jamie stopped seeking help altogether, it wasn't because he believed the lump was harmless. It was because, in some small, bitter way, he had started to believe it was him. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the kind where Jamie's thoughts were fixed on making it through the day unnoticed. He was working a temp job at a small printing office, quietly collating stacks of invoices, when he felt someone watching him. He glanced up to find Marie, the office's warm, middle-aged receptionist, studying him with a kind of gentle curiosity, not the sharp, invasive stare he'd grown used to. "You've been rubbing your neck a lot lately," she said softly, her tone more concerned than nosy. Jamie's instinct was to pull his collar higher and mumble something about a muscle strain, but Marie didn't push. Instead, the next morning, she stopped by his desk with her phone in hand. "I saw this last night," she said, showing him a video of a woman around his age sitting in a doctor's office, smiling through tears as a large, stubborn growth was finally removed. The caption read, "Dr. Claire and Gwyn restoring confidence one patient at a time." Jamie watched in silence as the video played, the woman's relief palpable even through the screen. He'd never seen a doctor lean in with such care, explaining every step, treating the patient not like a number on a clipboard, but like a human being who mattered. "That's her specialty," Marie added. "She takes on the tough cases. You should reach out." Jamie almost laughed at the suggestion, not because it wasn't kind, but because he'd been here before. He'd told his story to strangers in white coats, only to be met with blank stares and quick exits. Why would this time be any different? For days, the idea simmered at the edges of his mind. Every time he caught his reflection in a shop window or saw someone's gaze linger too long, the thought returned. What if she could help? But then came a familiar wall of doubt. He'd write, she'd read, and he'd never hear back. One night, unable to sleep, Jamie sat down at his kitchen table, opened his laptop, and began to type. He wrote about the years of hiding, the failed treatments, the job interviews that ended before they began. He didn't beg for a miracle, just for someone to take him seriously. The words came slow at first, then poured out like water breaking through a dam. When he finally hit send, his chest tightened. He half expected the email to vanish into the void, just another plea lost in the shuffle. But 2 days later, his phone buzzed with a reply. "Jamie, thank you for trusting me with your story. I'd like to offer you a free evaluation, so we can see exactly what we're dealing with. You've been through enough. We'll take this one step at a time. Dr. Claire and Gwyn." He read the message 3 times, hardly daring to believe it. For the first time in years, the weight on his neck didn't feel quite as heavy. There was a crack in the darkness now, a small, steady light that just might lead somewhere. Jamie's hands trembled slightly as the bus rumbled toward the city, each passing stop pulling him closer to Dr. Nguyen's clinic. The night before, he'd barely slept, his mind flickering between hope and a gnawing fear that the outcome would be yet another disappointment. When the clinic's glass door slid open, he stepped into a space bathed in warm light and the quiet hum of gentle music, a stark contrast to the cold, rushed clinics of his past. Dr. Nguyen greeted him in person, her handshake firm yet kind, her eyes steady and unhurried. She didn't glance at the clock or tap a pen impatiently. Instead, She sat with him, asking about his symptoms, his past attempts, and, most surprising, how it had all made him feel. For the first time in years, Jamie felt like someone was seeing him, not just a lump. The evaluation was thorough. Imaging scans, gentle palpations, careful notes. Dr. Nguyen explained that the mass was likely encapsulated, meaning it could be removed in one piece. "I won't promise it's simple," she said, "but I promise we'll face it together." Surgery day arrived under a pale winter sky. Jamie lay on the operating table, the sterile scent of antiseptic sharp in the air. Overhead, bright surgical lights turned the room into a stage where every movement was precise. The heart monitor beeped steadily as Dr. Nguyen's voice cut through his rising nerves. "You're in safe hands, Jamie. We'll take it slow." As the anesthesia settled in, his thoughts blurred, but fragments of sensation remained. A faint tugging in his neck, the muted clink of surgical instruments, the low murmur of nurses. Dr. Nguyen worked with steady precision, her gloved hands tracing careful lines, freeing the mass from where it had anchored itself deep against his nerves. When it finally came free, the room seemed to pause. It wasn't just a lump, it was a rare, encapsulated tumor, the size of a small orange, its surface gnarled and twisted like something that had no business living inside a human body. "No wonder you've been in pain," Dr. Nguyen murmured, her voice carrying a mix of awe and compassion. "This has been pressing on critical nerves for years." The tumor was placed gently into a metal basin, the soft clang echoing in the sterile space. For Jamie, even in his haze, it felt like hearing a shackle hit the floor. Hours later, he woke in recovery, his neck swaddled in soft bandages. The room was quiet except for the faint ticking of a wall clock. Dr. Nguyen appeared at his bedside, her expression warm. "It's gone," she said simply, "and you are going to feel like yourself again." When the nurse finally guided him to a mirror, Jamie braced himself. The familiar bulge that had shaped his reflection for so long was gone. In its place, a clean, even line, a healing wound, yes, but one that spoke of freedom rather than burden. His eyes stung, and before he could stop it, tears slipped down his cheeks. In that moment, it wasn't just about losing the lump. It was about reclaiming something he thought was gone forever, the right to stand in the light without hiding. "You've carried this for so long," Dr. Nguyen said, resting a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "But you are not your pain, Jamie. And you never were." For the first time in years, he believed it. The first morning Jamie woke up without the familiar weight at his neck, the sunlight spilling through the window felt different. The dull ache of recovery was there, but so was something new, an absence of the heaviness that had followed him for years. It was strange how light his body felt, how easy it was to lift his chin without tension. Back in his hometown, the changes were subtle at first. He stopped pulling up his jacket collar when passing neighbors. He bought a plain white T-shirt, the kind he'd avoided for nearly a decade, and wore it to the grocery store without a second thought. Old friends who hadn't seen him in years did a double take, not because of the scar, but because of the easy smile now lighting up his face. One afternoon, Jamie found himself sitting at a coffee shop, laptop open, applying for jobs he once thought were out of reach. For so long, interviews had felt like interrogations under a spotlight, his mind spinning with the fear of judgment. Now, that fear had loosened its grip. He was still the same man, but with a quiet, undeniable shift. He believed he was worth showing up for. Meanwhile, Dr. Nguyen's media team posted a short, edited version of his surgery to their clinic's social channels. The video quickly gained traction, thousands of views in hours, then tens of thousands. The comments section lit up with messages. "This man is so brave. I've been hiding my own condition for years. Thank you for sharing this. Dr. Nguyen is a hero." Jamie scrolled through them late one night, heart swelling at the outpouring of kindness from strangers around the world. On impulse, he typed his own comment. "For years, I thought my life was defined by this lump. I let it control my confidence, my choices, my happiness. If you're reading this and you're afraid to ask for help, please, don't wait as long as I did. There are people out there who will see you, not just your condition. This surgery didn't just change my body. It gave me back my life." That single comment became the most liked on the post, with replies from people sharing their own struggles, some with medical issues, others with invisible burdens. Jamie replied to as many as he could, realizing that his journey had become part of something larger, a chain reaction of courage. In the video's closing moments, his voice played over footage of him walking confidently through a sunlit park, head held high. We all carry something. Sometimes it's visible, sometimes it's not. But no matter what it is, you don't have to carry it alone. What burden are you holding on to? Share your story, inspire someone else, and maybe take that first step toward freedom. The screen faded to black with a gentle call to action, like share, subscribe, not just for the sake of numbers, but because each interaction meant another chance for someone, somewhere, to see a story that might change their life. And for Jamie, that was the most powerful transformation of all, not just being free from the lump, but becoming a voice for those still in the shadows, waiting for their own moment to step into the light.